You see, the government supposing does something like, in that case, it had issued by tender or something like that in the Haryana mining for giving licenses. It so happened that this Ram and Shyam said, all right, we are after the tender, we are ready to pay much more. Though they were the persons who had given tenders, but they said tender is wrong, this and other, forgetting that. Now, it matter ultimately went to the Supreme Court, and it was in the court that was to get more revenue, if you can call it judicial activism. That was not legislating law. I mean, they never said in all cases it should be done, but they gave an example that this is one of the methods, that is by auction. And
but Justice Mangia, should the courts be generating revenue for the government?
Why not? Why not? We are part of that system. We are all right. If by a method which is not illegal, which is not legislating, I could imagine legislating was, we are doing auction in this case, hereinafter in all cases of the grant of licenses, there shall be auction and no other method. I could imagine that the Supreme Court is legislating law of giving licenses. Perhaps yes. In that particular case they did it. I think that was an example being set for the government. Look, if we have done it, and that was with the permission of the party. You see, that was one method. Do you permit that we hold an auction? They said yes.
Before we go into a break, Mr. Patwalia, just a quick comment on the CJI also talked about something called the enforceability test, that only intervene in those cases which can actually be enforced.
There's a very thin line, according to me. The Supreme Court, right, as early as in Kesavan Bharati case said, there has to be separation of power between the three wings, the judiciary, the executive and the legislature. Now what we've reached as stage today is where we have seen that the executive and legislature have failed to perform their duties, and it is at that stage where the judiciary is coming in. Now to see a particular case, what is enforceability? Enforceability can be of a legislation or enforceability can be of a right. The Supreme Court now in the Spectrum, very famous Spectrum case has said that even your spectrum is a natural resource. There was no right, there was no legislature, but the Supreme Court stepped in and said that no, this is a legal right, it has to be enforced. So now the enforceability is a very is a thin line.
But what happens if the executive doesn't enforce a directive of the court?
Well, they'll be hauled for contempt. Why is the judiciary interfering? Judiciary is interfering in the first instance because, according to me, it's not judicial overreach, it's legislative and executive underreach. They have failed to perform the duties which are envisaged on them, and therefore the judiciary has no other alternative but to come and step in.
So judiciary in many cases has no other alternative but to step
absolutely.
in. I'll just come back to you. Here it is time for a short break. After the break, we will continue the discussion on the constitutional powers of the judiciary. Welcome back. We are discussing the importance of judicial intervention in the Indian democratic system. Before we proceed further, let us listen to what the lawyers and law students have to say on the issue.
In the government, we are daily watching that what is happening inside and outside, and it is horrible situation which can only be controlled by the honorable courts and none else.
कोई भी ऐसा डिसीजन जो जजेस पास कर दें, जो गवर्नमेंट पास नहीं कर, एग्जीक्यूट नहीं कर सकते, उसका फायदा कोई नहीं है.
There is a general grievance of the people that the enforcement of law is not there. The agencies, the executive, the government, the departments which are supposed to implement the legislation, they are not implementing in its true letter and spirit. Therefore, in this context, sometimes the judiciary has to exceed its limits.
There should be a demarcation between the judicial functions and the legislative functions.
लिमिट से बाहर जाके किसी के लिए प्रोग्रेस अच्छा काम के लिए करो. I think वो लिमिट से बाहर जाना गलत नहीं है.
Justice Gariwal, what if the government stops governing, the executive stops executing, the police instead of enforcing the law actually violates it?
Well, then you will have anarchy, and I don't think that's a hypothetical question.
But I think it is happening in a lot of states.
No, it happened in Punjab for 10 years, let me say. There was no rule of law during that period of militancy where there were so many encounters taking place.
But did the courts intervene enough?
They slept. Just like they did in emergency. They slept. Anyway, let's not talk about that. Now we're talking about governance. See, governance is a day-to-day thing. You know, everything, so much governance is taking place. Nobody appreciates that. And there's also good governance taking place. No one talks about that. But you get one stray case and the person files a PIL. Okay, he gets his right redressed and there is slight overreach. Fine, that's okay. So there has to be a balance. I don't think it's such a worrying thing. But what I liked, what he had said, Justice Kapadia, was that there should be sustainable development. You see,
that's right.
For protecting the environment, you don't stop all development. So if there has to be sustainable development, if you are going to have a new city...
That's when he talked about environment issues also, yes. Something which people like Justice Kuldeep Singh have been talking.
So that is a good thing. You have to, you can't, you got to have development. And to have sustainable development, judges can't decide what is sustainable development. Because these are matters for experts, real experts. Supposing you have to cut a road through a forest, then you got to have people who know about road construction, or how many buses are to ply. Then you got to have people experts on transport who will tell you how much emission there's going to be. So sustainable development is an expert thing, and
that's right. That's a valid point.
Just to cut in here,
yes.
The concept of sustainable development came and was enforced by the Supreme Court. There was no law, there was no legislation. Environmental law as it is today has been, I'll say, given birth to by the Supreme Court. So therefore, can you say there was activism? No. There was enforceability, there was protection of your rights, and that's why environmental law is as it is today.
Justice Verma, isn't it very ironical that while in India we are saying that judiciary should not intervene the way it is doing, in our neighboring country in Pakistan, the judiciary is actually intervening and ensuring that the government should function the way the constitution.
So for Pakistan there are two aspects. One was when Musharraf was there. No, he was not a duly elected that person. So there were people who were definitely against him. There was a movement from one corner to another corner when he attacked the judiciary, when he removed the judges. Then the people and the advocates came on the street. Judiciary saved that situation, and he was forced to go out because he transgressed his powers, executive powers. That happened. Now what's happening in Pakistan now? They say you register case against the president. First Prime Minister says the Constitution says that President cannot be liable for anything, crime, etc., whatever their Constitution is this. I will not do it. He goes there, is committed for contempt, goes back. Second Prime Minister is facing the same thing. Think of this position. If the third also comes and says the fifth also comes, sixth also comes, then where will the civil administration? Then the question will be, who is running the administration? If the government seeing all these things doesn't want to do something, will the judiciary say it? Okay, yes, you don't do it, otherwise we will kill you. The things will happen, the people will start losing interest in judiciary also. If they transgress their powers, as the question is this, if enforceability is not there.
Right, I get your point. Mr. Patwalia, now, there have been numerous cases of, what is seen as judicial overreach. For example, there was a case of the Supreme Court issuing a notice to the government on attacks against the Indian students in Australia. This is something which is the foreign policy domain. Then, the Supreme Court made some observations on the proliferation of elephant statues during the Mayawati government in UP. Don't you think these are cases of judicial overreach?
If an Indian is being manhandled outside of the country and there is no policy to protect him, then the court can certainly issue notice to the center or the state and say, wake up, frame a policy. The court
didn't. But that policy has to be framed by another government.
That's right.
Where the Supreme Court's that's right, but it doesn't run.
But they're not aliens. We have a co-proliferation treaty. They are allies. The government can certainly wake up and protect those, and that's all the Supreme Court did. There was no direction given to the Australian government. It was just to wake up and tell the Indian government that you're not protecting your own citizens, and that's what should be done.
Justice Mongia, the Supreme Court had also intervened in the case of police reforms. Now, do you think that is within the purview of the Supreme Court?
Again, I am saying if the government, whose job is the time to time to reform the police, and it is doing nothing, I am taking it is doing nothing to reform the police or amend the rules. We had our rules since 1934, Punjab rules were never amended. If the Supreme Court or the High Court says, all right, time has come now, state, act, do something to reform, either amend the laws or make some policies, etc. But as I initially said, it can't say, all right, that will be the last. If you don't make law, then I'll tell you this is the law. No, I don't agree there, but must give sufficient chance to the parliament.
But Justice Verma, now if let us say on the defection law, if the speaker drags his feet, for 1 year, 2 years, even 5 years,
the courts can definitely interfere, because that is the enforcement of right of a person, challenging the defection or not challenging the defection. That's the enforcement of that right. If there is a
whenever they enforce that, whenever they intervene, it would be a case of intervention, no, into their rights.
No, into whose right?
Into the rights of the legislature.
No. There is an act. To enforce the act properly, interpret it, that is the function of the judiciary. If somebody goes there is the act, you have given me this much of right, those are violating those rights, and 5 years will pass. When will my case will be decided? Definitely the court can come and
but cases are carried on for 3 to 4 years and almost become infectious.
This is something that the judiciary should come very heavily.
Take an example of mercy petition to be heard by the President of India. Should it take so much time, which is a matter before the Supreme Court? We are under subject to this. Now, supposing the Supreme Court was to say, all right, once the mercy petition goes through the procedure and reaches President, please lay down some law. We tell you to frame some law or policy that the President of India should decide within a reasonable time, not beyond this much, supposing it does not make law. Under such circumstances where a man is, the swords are hanging on him that he may die tomorrow, and 8 years, 9 years pass, and then they say, all right, the matter is still under consideration. Can't in those cases the judiciary step in and say, all right, now we tell you, giving you a chance to make a policy law, now we'll tell you from here onwards, the President of India, etc., from the day one, it must decide within 6 months.
So that means we possibly can't have a sweeping view on this. It all depends on case to case.
Case to case.
But this thing
Parliament must be given one chance to legislate if you wish to. If the judiciary says, must give them a chance to do something.
But this is one thing.
Yes, we're running out of time, so you'll have to.
Many of the judgment says, frame this law as we are saying it. Till you frame this law, this will, as we are saying, will be law applicable till you frame it. No, this is a legislative, it is not permitted. It has to come in many cases, scores of cases.
Article 142 of the Supreme Court says so. Grants power to the Supreme Court to do inherent justice between the parties, and what the Supreme Court has exercised Article 142 time and again to do justice. Therefore, even in the absence of legislation, the Supreme Court can interfere, and it has interfered, and I must say it should interfere to bring to rights between the parties.
In any case, I think it appears Justice Kapadia has kicked off yet another debate.
Justice would be done in accordance with law. Not today, and in the newspaper it was, there is a 6 months cooling period required for getting divorced by mutual consent.
Shortened.
They shortened it to 4 months. After seeing that, they said we are doing justice to the parties under 142. High Court is not allowed to do that. That is only power with the Supreme Court in a given case, and they are very cautious that we are not laying down law. In this particular case, we are doing it.
Since we are out of time, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us in the discussion. On the face of it, what the Chief Justice of India, Justice Kapadia, said about separation of powers is accurate. But the question that arises is, what if the government does not govern and the executive does not execute? Clearly, going by the spirit of the constitutional provisions, there is need for each of the functionaries to be independent yet ensure that the others too perform their roles. With that, we end this edition of Prime Debate. Good luck and goodbye.